Oh, okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the council meeting of Monday, June the 15th, 2026. And we're just going to start the territorial acknowledgement. I offer this acknowledgement with respect and gratitude, recognizing that my life has unfolded across lands governed by long-standing treaty relationships between Indigenous nations and the Crown. These treaties, historic, living, and often unfulfilled, shape the places that have sustained me and continue to guide my understanding of responsibility and reconciliation. My life began in Toronto on lands covered by Treaty 13, the Toronto Purchase of 1805 made with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I was raised in Woodstock, Ontario, within the treaty governed by the Upper Canada Treaties, specifically Treaty 3, the Between the Lakes Purchase of 1792. These agreements involve the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and neutral Ottawandaruk people. As I moved to Waterloo for university and early career opportunities, I lived and worked within the lands encompassed by the Haldimand Tract, granted to the Six Nations in 1784, 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. This region also falls within the Between the Lakes Treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. During my time as president of Professional Engineers Ontario, I traveled across many treaty territories throughout Canada. These journeys deepened my awareness of the diversity of treaty histories and the responsibilities they carry, and how these agreements continue to shape the identities and governance of the provinces and territories. Since August of last year, I've been privileged to work in the Northwest Territories on lands governed by Treaty 8 and Treaty 11 within the traditional territories of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation, Dry Geese Territory, and the North Slave Métis. In preparing for engineering work at Ipperwash recently, I undertook a 2-day awareness program to learn about the history of the Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, whose lands are shaped by complex and painful treaty relationships, including the legacy of Treaty 29 and the broader Upper Canada treaties. Through this learning, I was reminded of the Seven Grandfathers' teachings, which continue to influence how I understand my responsibilities within treaty relationships. Across each stage of my life, these treaties remind me that I am a guest on lands whose histories long predate my own. I acknowledge these treaty relationships as ongoing commitments, ones that call for learning, respect, and meaningful action. Just to pause for a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we paused to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, council, and the general nature thereof. Seeing none, we're on to the consent motion, and I understand that there's 2 items at a minimum that people would like to see pulled, and those are items D for community services and item F related to parking rates, but is there any others that people would like pulled from consent? Seeing none, may I have a mover for the other consent items? Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Vasek. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. We're looking at items moved from consent. So the first one is item D, community services. And I believe there is some questions on this item.
Yes, thank you. Thank you through you, Chair. I appreciate that. And a couple of these questions, unfortunately, Councillor Rowe is unable to be here today, and there's a couple of questions I offered to ask in her absence. So one of the questions is, overall the comments that I share with Councillor Rowe are just around the general affordability challenges that many in our community face, and how, and I know that staff are very cognizant of that as well, but what consideration was given in the process of setting these rates, particularly as it relates to the fee for the leisure access fee, because the report references that there's been a 40% increase of requests. So I'm curious how much additional funds were put into this program And if other municipalities have a policy that with every 5% increase in fees, if that translates into an automatic increase in the leisure access fee.
Through you, Chair Freeman, to the Mayor, I'll maybe start that answer. And we do have the various directors from Community Services here, as well as Brad to help layer on to my answer here. So yeah, certainly acknowledge that there's definitely a balance between the fees and charges and affordability with everything going on in the economic climate right now. And so in terms of the first part of your question around the fee assistance program, as you'll note in the report, we are through the additional revenue generated from the fees and charges, we are proposing that $100,000 of that be essentially reinvested back into the fee assistance program, which does support low-income individuals with accessing both sports and rec and arts programming, both city-run as well as affiliate-run, which is really unique to the city of Waterloo. And so, you know, the staff are very conscious of that affordability element, and so that was a deliberate decision to reinvest some of the additional revenue that would be generated back into that program. And then sort of a similar vein with the facility rental discount program, which again provides a discount to affiliate groups for use of space at city facilities. The report also does note that a proposal for $150,000 would also be reinvested into that program, again, both with the lens of providing affordability to those individuals in circumstances where that is needed. And so I hope that addresses that part of your question, and maybe I'll look to the staff table there if there's anything else to layer on.
Thank you, Kevin. Through you, Chair Freeman. Yeah, when setting the recommended user fees, it's a very complex process. We need to consider lots of factors, and affordability is one of them. But when we look at the various cost inputs that go into delivering these programs, so in this case, recreation programs, there's been significant cost pressures across the board. Things like the labor costs have gone up significantly. Those are casual positions that will be compensated in accordance with living wage, so that adds some cost elements to the programs. But also just material costs, so things like chlorine, stuff of that nature, those are going up far in excess of a standard inflationary increase. So we need to take that into account, and then we also need to ensure that the fees are comparable. So hopefully you'll see in this year's report, kind of across the board, but in particular in community services, we did try to provide additional context in terms of the local comparators, and I think in many cases we do compare very, very well. So the affordability piece is tricky because we're creating a fee structure that is seeking appropriate cost recovery kind of across the board from an average user, but then we also need to be mindful that there are those that this will be more impactful to than others. And then, so as Kevin alluded to, that's where we see the fee assistance program being their mechanism to kind of help offset that pressure. And so we are recommending, as part of the 2027 budget, it would be an increase of $100,000 to fee assistance. And we'll continue to monitor that to ensure that program is properly funded. And we may see that part of the solution is additional funding needs to go to that program in the future. So very, very complex process, but we try to take all that into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give us a sense, either through you, Brad, or Kevin or Jill, like the $100,000, when there's a 40% increase in the requests, like approximately how much will that tackle? Do you have a sense of, or is that a Tiffany question?
Hi, Mayor McCabe. To answer your question, the $100,000 will go towards that increase in users, but we were seeing this increase in users accessing fee assistance throughout the last year prior. So since the pandemic, it's been on the rise. So we're hopeful that it will allow anybody that applies for fee assistance to be eligible for fee assistance to access that program and not be over budget at that point.
No, I understand. I was just wondering how many more people might be able to access, or kids, I guess, really, how many more kids or youth might be able to access programs because of the increase in leisure assistance funding? If you like kind of ballpark that, like would it take the 40% maybe that aren't getting it down to 20% or? Someone's trying to get your attention back there.
Yeah, Jill has sort of indicated that it might be close to 250 people that would have additional access. The challenge is, though, that we are already seeing a demand above and beyond what we were funded at last year. So to say that that's equivalent to us serving another 250, I think is just unknown at this point, but yes, that's what it would be equivalent to.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know. I appreciate the work that staff puts into this to try and help balance the various needs of various people in our community. Okay, that's helpful for the fee assistance piece. The other question was around the vacant building monitoring. I'll just let. So, how many vacant buildings approximately does the city currently monitor? And have staff considered a broader vacant homes policy, vacant homes bylaw that could be used as a tool to address long-term residential vacancies? We may have addressed this or asked this previously at a year or so ago, but again, I'm asking this on behalf of Councillor Rowe.
Certainly, through you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor McCabe, for the question for Councillor Rowe. Currently, MES is monitoring approximately 26 properties across the city. It does fluctuate, though, as buildings are occupied or sold. We have identified the need to update our current vacant building bylaw to establish a more formal registration system, and that will be on our work plan for 2027. It was highlighted for this year. We had some other constraints and other projects this year, so it certainly is on our work plan for 2027.
Okay. Question about the rental rent eviction licensing application fee. I think that's probably a you question, Nicole? Yep. Okay, because it references that it's $650. I was just curious, like, who pays that fee? How's it collected? And is the purpose of this fee to help fund the program itself, or could you just unpack that a bit?
Certainly. So it isn't going to fund the program, but offset a small administrative portion of taking in for the application fee, processing the application, reviewing the application as well. So that is, we set the fee based on what Kitchener was setting theirs at to be comparable. It is lower than Toronto's, so we just, being that it's a new program, we sort of did a municipal comparator to help us establish that fee, but it certainly will assist in some cost recovery for administering the program.
Okay, thanks. So who pays that fee?
So the applicant, the property owner that would want to be doing the renovation and getting the permit in order to.
Okay, I was worried that this was if you were trying to fight a renoviction. This was, okay, that wasn't really clear in the report, or maybe I'm just didn't read it properly, but okay, just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, thanks very much. And then I just had a question about the fire services as well, which I guess is back to maybe, hi Chief. Because there's a lot of different fees outlined there, and I was curious about what we charge for false alarms, because I believe we get quite a number of false alarms on a regular basis. And so I'm wondering what the fee is, but my follow-up question, depending what the answer is if we should be considering a significant increase would that provide any deterrence value for false alarms, for people that just pull the alarms?
Yeah, so through the chair. So we have 4 different categories of fire alarms: equipment malfunction, failure to notify fire services. So that's like someone is doing some construction and then the alarm goes off. And then malicious, so someone pulls the fire alarm. And then the fire alarm when the owner doesn't respond within 45 minutes. So we respond to a fire alarm, and then the owner doesn't come within 45 minutes. So all those fees are $195.84 this year and $200.96 next year. As for increasing that fee, I'm not, like, I have no insight whether that could be a deterrent for owners of these facilities. It is the person that does, like, pulling the alarm is not the one who's getting charged. It's the owner of the building that's getting charged.
Right, so, but would that like incent them to do more education or anything like that, of that nature, to try and avoid anything like that? Or is this just a real spur of the moment, someone pulls the alarm, or you know?
If it's a building where it happens regularly, we do provide information to the owner and have maybe an information session for those that live in the building. So it really depends on the building. So if it happens multiple times, then we would, as fire services, feel the necessity to actually connect with the owner and communicate with some of the tenants. So for students, for example, we provide communication, what happens when they pull the alarm, how many trucks are actually responding, and that is taking away from the response for the rest of the city.
And do we know, has that had an impact? Has that made any changes?
It
Or is
has
it difficult 'cause
in
they
individual
change all the time?
situations, yes, it does have some impact, but it's hard to say. Well, we're not tracking really the data when it comes to all the fire alarms, but if we, like I said, when we focus on one building, we do see an impact.
Okay, thanks for that. And sorry, I do have one more about the facility rental fees. Thanks, Chief. So the comment was, well, some community groups can absorb the increase in facility rental fees. Others cannot, and I believe the report references nonprofits. But we continue to hear from community groups that the cost of renting city space is already a significant barrier for many. So it's a concern. So are we differentiating between nonprofits and charities, or is there a way to do that? And some nonprofits have more. Some nonprofits are can more easily afford the fee versus other nonprofits. So just curious if you could provide some information about that.
The current affiliation policy does not differentiate the various not-for-profit groups, saying that our work upcoming through our Sports and Rec Action Plan will be looking at the various groups and how we can provide free or low-cost space depending on kind of that affordability lens. Right now, basically, if you're affiliated with the city, you receive facility rental discount. Otherwise, you do not. So.
Okay. So I guess that's something we need to take a pretty close look at, because again, there's like charities
That's
who
right.
are probably very low income in lots of cases, maybe not all cases, but then the difference between the nonprofits and, you know, charities, I think really needs to be taken a look at there.
Yes, we intend to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think that's all from that perspective.
Councillor Hanmer probably thought of some more stuff with your questions.
I do have just one, it's more a comment to your last comment. I think we have to be careful with the not-for-profit and not-for-profit charities, because there are some of our organizations who are not eligible to be charities. They very much may like to be, but the federal regulations don't allow them to do that. And I know staff will take that into consideration so that we are continuing to be as equitable as we can be. The goal is we want to have people to access the services. I do have a question, though. The mayor started one of down a path of what else is considered with the fees, but I'm wondering if we could comment, and it may be to you, Kevin, to comment a bit more on what's considered with the different groups and how you're coming up with the fees. Who else do we take into account, or what other considerations are there as we're setting the fees for the various affiliate groups?
Through you, Chair Freeman and Councillor Hammer. Yeah, so just on that piece, I do want to say that there's been a lot of thought and effort that's gone into setting the various fees and charges, both from our finance team and community services team. And so staff look at a number of different things. Cost escalation is one when we're setting fees. Things like utilities we know have gone up, substantially over the last year, labor, equipment, supplies, things like that. We also take into consideration and do a lot of work, in particularly with this year's report around a comparator scan within our local and regional context. And so we do very, very much so look at what the regional comparators are charging for similar services. And by and large, I would say the City of Waterloo is is either slightly below or on par with the majority of those throughout the region, with the exceptions noted in the report here. We also do look at things like adding a minimum inflationary baseline, and then in certain circumstances look at recovering costs over and above that. But you know, that's all to say that staff really do take the affordability piece into consideration, and as we've discussed with fee assistance and facility rental discounts as an example, also community grants, other things like that, the free use pilot that Tiffany had alluded to as well. And so there's a lot of factors that kind of go into that overall assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Still on the community
Yes,
services,
yeah.
yep.
That prompted me to, Councillor Hanmer's comment prompted another thought or question. Would it make, and this is for takeaway when we do the planning around space, use of space, but like, for me, like the charity versus nonprofit thing is more about like how much access, what kind of budget do people have to work with, right? Like that's really more so what it's about. So should we consider like it's more about their budget versus whether they're a charity or a nonprofit and what difference that may make? But I don't know if that makes a difference or if we're allowed to think of it that way, but that's my question, if you want to answer it now, or you can take it away.
I can just maybe make a comment that that is how we evaluate our community grants right now. So we do take into consideration the budgets that folks are bringing forward in their application and the financial resources that they might have available to them. So whether that approach moves forward into free or low-cost space use, we could definitely consider that.
Okay, thanks. And just my other question, because the inflation piece was referenced a couple of places, but I think I saw a couple of numbers, 3.5, and another place it's referenced is 2 to 3%. So I'm just curious which number we're actually using.
Through Chair Freeman to the mayor, kind of a range, I guess, in terms of the inflation is the tricky part with looking at inflation indices. So right now, when we look at CPIX for what will kind of inform budget, it's in the range of 2.5, 2.6% on a 12-month rolling average. That's really trying to predict what we're going to anticipate in cost increases in the future. But it's really just one of many factors that we need to take into account because other cost inputs for these programs may or may not be in line with that level of inflation. So labor is an example where, you know, labor may be going up at a rate of closer to 3%. Kevin alluded to electricity. We're, you know, in the last couple of years, it's going up, you know, 8 to 10%. Chlorine significantly higher than any rate of inflation. Fuel continues to be a big input. So the consumer price index or the Ontario Consumer Price Index or CPIX, which removes the most volatile items, is really just intended to give staff and council kind of a framework or a range that we're working within. But there's a lot of different factors that we need to consider. So, you know, we would kind of prefer to, you know, reference a range. So kind of 2 to 3% is kind of where economists are saying we're headed into the later part of 2026 and into 2027. But yeah, it's really just one of many, many factors to consider. So hopefully that helps, Mayor.
Sorry, yes, it does. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I had many of the same questions when I was reading through these reports, but then later in the package, I saw on page 172, user fee modernization review, and I wondered, what is this and how does it relate to the previous reports in the package? And so I thought I would just ask about this.
Through Chair Freeman to Councillor Wright, I think that's a question for myself. One of the things that the Budget Committee has been contemplating is many of the things that we're talking about today with Council. And so we, through the leadership of the senior leadership team through CMT, put forward an idea to look at a user fee review as part of the work that we would do in 2027 that would help inform the 2028 to 2030 budget. And it's a lot of the things we're looking at. Are we recovering costs at the appropriate level for this fee? Are there certain fees where staff and council the goal is not full cost recovery or closer to full cost recovery because we have different objectives, which is supporting the community to have access to that. And then the goal there is to maybe go a little bit wider with that. And, you know, are there assets that we could be entertaining for other purposes? So looking at, are there underutilized assets that maybe there's an alternative strategy that we could look from a revenue generation perspective? And really just with the goal of getting creative to help inform the 2028 to 30 budget. So early days is that review is not fully scoped. But the staff tabled budget that we're working on, that would be released in December. The intent is that you would see a project in the capital budget that would then allow staff to embark on that review with a consultant. So more to come on that in December, but good pickup.
And just a very quick follow-up. And so my understanding from that later report in our package is that that would be an all of City of Waterloo user fee review, not just community services.
Yeah, through you, Chair Freeman. I would say more fees than just community services, but I would be careful to say all fees because it may not be a line-by-line fee review, and I think it would be kind of a targeted strategic fee review. There are some fees that obviously generate large, revenue based on volumes, and then there's others that are a little bit more less frequently used, and so I think it would be a strategic review of some of our most critical fees.
Any other questions on the community or the corporate services fees and charges? Seeing none, is there a mover for this motion? Moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Roach. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. And now we'll move on to the other item pulled from consent, which is the 2027 parking rates. And I think that Mayor McCabe, you had questions on this one.
Yes, thank you very much. Excuse me. I just want to make sure I understand our uptown parking rates and particularly how they compare to other municipalities. So the report has that after 2 hours, we charge $3.50 an hour. I guess what kind of jumped out at me is that so people can park in uptown for 3 hours. It'll cost them $3.50. And that's like almost the cost of, like, it's only $4 to take public transit, right? Like, so it's cheaper than the cost of public transit to park for 3 hours in one way. In one way on public transit costs more than 3 hours of parking in uptown. So you don't have to respond to that. I do have another question, but it just really jumped out at me that is a heck of a deal to park for 3 hours in uptown for $3.50 or $1.16 for an hour. So I guess the question is, are we undervaluing the cost of parking in uptown?
Through you, Chair, to Mayor McCabe. So as part of the recommendations that are in the report today, we would like to do a parking utilization study in 2027 and then look to do a parking strategy in 2028. And those would be the types of questions we would be looking to address as part of that work.
Okay, all right. That's fine. I guess we'll wait. That's almost 2 more years, but I think it's something that we really do need to take a really critical look at because, as I said, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to park for 3 hours than it is to take a one transit trip, to uptown or to anywhere else. I was also just curious about, because you moved recently or in the last few months to a new system for the monthly parking passes. So how's that working? Has that created efficiencies? What's sort of what's an update on that front?
So through your chair to Mayor McCabe, we have not implemented a new system yet. We're still working through that. We did have a vendor secured. Unfortunately, that contract, we weren't able to move forward for that contract. So we've taken some steps back and we're looking internally at reviewing our needs again, and then we'll move forward with a new NRFP for a new system.
Oh, I wasn't aware that hadn't been implemented. Okay, because this was supposed to create some efficiencies in the system, was it not?
Yes, this will provide us with some opportunities to create some efficiencies.
So when is that coming back then?
We are hoping to have the new RFP out in the next 3 to 4 months, and then we'll look at an implementation timeline based on what the vendors come back with.
Okay, because when was this originally supposed to have been implemented? Like, I thought it was last summer.
The contract, the decision that we weren't able to move forward with the original contract was made last September.
Okay. So it's taking a year to get it re-tendered? Or what, has something changed within that process or within the contract?
We are looking instead of moving forward with just a parking permit management system, we're looking at now tying it to an automated license plate recognition system for enforcement as well. So we're reviewing all of those needs as one for the new bid that will go out.
Okay, all right.
It kind of sounds like maybe this is a briefing note piece, since it's not really a user fee.
True, okay, true. Like, I wasn't aware of that. I was gonna ask if like, I assume that the BIA has been kept apprised of this, because I know this was a significant issue that they were hearing from some of the companies, but you're right, it's not a
Yeah.
user fee thing. Okay. So my question then around, to go back to the user fee thing, with the WDSS, and it said that the need to do maintenance on our parking lots, and it said there are significant asset rehabilitation needs. I was just curious what those are. Is it like just filling potholes, or is it like full repaving, or like what kind of shape are our parking lots in?
It is full repaving of some of our parking lots that are now approaching the end of their useful life.
And do we need them fixed more for the events that we run out of there, or is this like I'm just not really sure. I guess I'm curious what difference a kind of chopped up parking lot like with potholes makes for parking, right? Like, it's just a car's gonna park there all day, or are we doing it more for the events that we run out of there?
The resurfacing work isn't being done for the events, it's being done to maintain the integrity of the asset, so the parking lot itself. So while you're true, parking lot is different from a roadway, vehicles travel slower, so potholes or things like that aren't as much of a concern. There are still liability concerns from slip and falls, if there's cracks in the pavement or uneven quality. And also, if we leave them too long, we would have to replace the complete underneath, the base as well, at an additional cost to the city, as opposed to doing repairing the area on top, which comes at a lesser cost.
Okay, all right. And then my other question was around the EV infrastructure, because it says, I guess I'm curious, like, because it said there's a recommended increase is equivalent to the cost of parking for 3 hours. That was in the report. I guess I'm wondering why the city's providing this infrastructure versus third parties would provide this EV infrastructure.
So we do have some circumstances where third parties are providing some of the infrastructure. So the only EV charging station that kind of parking owns per se is the one that's in the Waterloo Town Square North lot. The ones that you see on William Street or on Father David Bauer Drive, those on-street stations, those are there in partnership with Grand River Energy. And through an agreement, Grand River Energy has permission to locate them on city land. So there are partnerships and few that are owned by the city.
Okay, but are we investing in more EV infrastructure? Like, because that's my question, like, why would we invest in it and maintain it and have the responsibility for it versus third parties?
Through Chair Freeman to the mayor, there are a few different EV chargers that we are considering in partnership with organizations such as Grand River Energy. And a lot of times what we're seeing is Grand River Energy needs to partner with the municipality to gain access to grant funding. So there are some provincial grants that are open currently. Charge Ontario is one, and so through a partnership, we're able to secure significant funding for the EV infrastructure. And then we operate that in partnership with Grand River Energy. Really the goal of adjusting the fee in the fees and charges bylaw is to ensure that the rate that we're listing for what we're charging will work for Grand River Energy from their model as well. You can see the fee is significantly low at this point in time based on even just, the goal of recovering the electricity cost. Not to mention the O&M that goes with these units, and then future replacement. So through conversation with Scott Prevost and Heather and the facilities team, the opportunity was that if we could get that aligned to a more appropriate level, then it will also ensure that Grand River's using that fee on the partnership units as well. So as Christine noted, we only have a couple of actual city-owned EVs that are kind of from legacy arrangements, and I think on a go-forward basis, we're looking to partner wherever we can. But that was the intent of that adjustment. You will see as a percentage, it's a little bit higher, but it's really to account for the true cost of those units.
Okay, if we're accounting for the true cost, that's one thing. And I mean, obviously, I'm really supportive of people transitioning to EVs 100%. It just, was curious why it would need to be the city's responsibility to provide that versus, the way gas-fired vehicles are, we don't provide that kind of service. But I'm also just aware that there's a lot of damage done to the EV chargers as well. So like what we're kind of opening ourselves up to in terms of like constant operation and upgrades and things like that. I just don't want these things to become, small money pits for us. That's really what my line of questioning was. But if it's required that we partner with them in order for them to get grants, I guess we don't really have a choice then, is what you're saying, or they don't have a choice, if I'm understanding that correctly.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, all right.
Right. Is there any other questions on this item? Seeing none, do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Bassick, seconded by Councillor Bodley. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay, so we're moving on from the consent agenda to staff reports. And the first one is the 2026 Asset Management Annual Review. And I'm sure that Cassandra's going to mention this, but I was going to also mention it. There's a book on your desk entitled Inside Public Sector Innovation, How Local Governments Put Ideas into Action. And chapter 9, starting on page 146, is the chapter written by our own Cassandra Pacey. And it's outlining the asset management plan we use here at the City of Waterloo. And I love the fact that it is within the whole idea of innovation, because I think that that's a true lens by which we look at our asset management. So with that, I'll turn things over to Cassandra, and I believe everybody has a signed copy too of this book. So thank you for that, Cassandra. It's really kind that you supplied those to each of us.
Well, thank you. Councillor Freeman, or Chair Freeman, members of Council, corporate management, the members of public and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Over the next few minutes, I will highlight a few key messages from the City's 2026 Asset Management Annual Review and also talk about the book. This report is being tabled today before Council to provide a clear and consistent annual update on the state of the City's infrastructure assets. It also fulfills requirements under Ontario Regulation 588-17, which calls for an ongoing review of asset management plans and progress. The report outlines the City's progress in implementing our asset management plan while identifying factors that are limiting implementation, as well as strategies to address those challenges. We continue to make progress in implementing the City's asset management plan. This includes strong collaboration with our subject matter experts, which is critical to advancing this work. We are also seeing ongoing improvements in data quality, validation, long-term planning, and performance projection analysis. At the same time, there are challenges implementing progress. This includes insufficient funding for rehabilitation and replacement of assets, as the City has an annual infrastructure funding gap of almost $65 million, $43 million for tax-based funded assets, and $22 million for enterprise-funded assets. We are also navigating internal and external complexities that affect timelines and delivery. Examples of external complexities include changes in regional, federal, and provincial direction, economic and market uncertainty, and regional funding constraints. Internal complexities include data maintenance, asset maintenance challenges, and increasing project complexity. In response, we are leveraging Council's reinvestment funding plan to support progress. We are adjusting project timelines as needed focusing on manageable projects that can be delivered within existing staffing levels and when needed, using consultants and/or contract staff to advance these projects. And as Councillor Freeman noted, the city continues to innovate. In 2023, staff submitted an abstract on the city's asset management approach, which was one of 17 case studies selected to be included in an academic publication on municipal innovation. The book, Inside Public Sector Innovation, was released earlier this year, and I had the opportunity, as Councillor Freeman noted, to author Chapter 9 with support from corporate communications. I'd sincerely like to thank Council, corporate management, Brad Witzel, the asset management team, and all of our subject matter experts for your ongoing support and commitment to advancing asset management at the City of Waterloo. As a token of appreciation, a copy of the book has been placed at each member of Council's and CMT's seat, and there is one in asset management for anyone who chooses to read it. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And as always, I really appreciate all the information that comes through on the asset management system, and I also value how we use that to help guide infrastructure and other financial decisions. In a way, it feels more equitable to distribute resources based on that asset management plan. And so I mean, obviously, as council, we still have lots and lots of work to do, but the asset management plan is just such an important piece. Notwithstanding the fact that it's regulated to do it, I still think that even though we meet the regulation, we use it for other purposes. So I appreciate all the work that you do on that. Questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Everybody knows this is my favorite report. So I just want to tap into the innovation aspect of the asset management system. And there's two things in particular that struck me in the report. One is where you talk about the inclusion of scenario analysis tools and where that might be headed. And the second one relates to the maturity of the data and the challenges that we face in continuing to collect good quality data, because garbage in, garbage out. And so I just wondered if you could speak to both of those.
Through you, Chair Freeman and Councillor Wright. So the DSS, we continue to innovate it. We have recently, through one of the team members on the asset management team, Rob Aylesworth, we recently completely overhauled and redid the DSS to become more innovative in the fact that now we can run alternative scenarios. So when the team is saying, oh, well, can we change this projection or change this ESL to see what's happening, we have that capability now. A little bit more detailed than we had before. Before it was more perhaps at the higher level. So now we can go a little bit deeper. We can run those scenarios. We can go in and add funding to see what we can do. And so we are continually talking about what we're going to innovate. Right now we're in the infant stage of the DSS 3.0, so I can't tell you exactly where we're going, but we're pretty excited about having some more tools available to us to be able to look at things differently for staff and for council. And then in regards to data maturity, we're always looking to improve. Some of the areas, they have limited staff capacity to be able to necessarily work on different things, but we are seeing some improvements since we started looking at data maturity and talking about that. So I'm excited to see that improvement in working with staff because they are interested in working with us and seeing what their data can do, but some of it is literally limited to staff capacity and what the other side is necessarily able to do with us.
So just as a follow-up, the conclusion that I would take from this is that the quality of the data and the data maturity probably also impacts the quality of the scenario analysis that is made possible. Would that be a good assumption to make?
Through Chair Freeman and Councillor Wright, that is correct, that depending on the quality of the data depends on whether or not the scenario provides the best information, but it's a starting point. And one of the things with asset management is you just need to start, you need to keep going, because everybody's at a different level. And so, for example, in parks, they might be at a lower maturity level, but they are getting better. So we continue to see that improvement. But yeah, and some of it's the condition data. So if we don't have condition data, then the information may show a higher or lower infrastructure funding gap than it might otherwise. So yes, we are continuing to see in progress. Please don't take anything in the report to say that nobody's working on it, because we are desperately working on it to make sure that we are giving you the best information possible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mayor McCabe.
Thank you, and thank you again for the report. All the reports are my favorite. I can't just pick one, but I just was curious around, like, because you're referencing data analysis and the maintenance of data, and the use of data to determine where we need to put our investments or our infrastructure dollars first, which is all really great. So I'm just curious, because we're in this high-tech hub in Waterloo, how or are we working with local partners to help us, particularly on the data management and the technology pieces? Are there things that they can assist with or help us with or point us in the right direction?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to the mayor. At this point, we haven't engaged anyone outside the city because our staff are the experts, so it hasn't been something that I've specifically been searching for. I do know of an organization that's being funded from NCAN, I think, NRCan, that is looking to do something similar for just the underground assets. So we have an organization that is looking to do something very similar, but we haven't reached out to our tech industry to see if there's anything specific that they can do to help us.
Okay. Or what about, which is fine, I mean, if we have the better expertise within the city, that's great to hear. There's also the Future Cities Institute, which has, they bring in a lot of research and access to students and MyTax funding and things of that nature to help on a variety of projects that cities are working on. I know we have the WDSS in place and you're on the third version of it. I'm just curious if there, I mean, I'll leave it with you, but there might be an opportunity to access co-op students who could assist with some of this, or, and then through them, access to some of the research dollars that they can, like the program, if I remember correctly, like they fund half the cost of a co-op student, if I'm remembering it correctly, to help on, I mean, they're helping across Canada and in some cases in different international companies or countries to assist on city challenges. So it might be something to look into. Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Okay. My other question was, how does this tool, in the third version that you have, how does this tool measure changing infrastructure impacts due to climate change, particularly regarding increased storms, the increased ferocity of storms, year-round, from winter, summer, spring, fall, as well as increased heat? Like, can it evaluate infrastructure degradation or breakdown?
Through you, Chair Freeman, to the mayor. At this time, we haven't embedded climate change into the tool. There's some limited information that we have, so that's one of the things that I need to work with Michelle Lee and her team, is to figure out how that does. We suspect that, say road resurfacing, maybe instead of happening every 20 years, maybe it needs to happen every 15 years, but there's limited data to tell us that. In regards to storm in particular, again, we have some information, but not enough to give us something that we can specifically do to project out the performance just yet. So it's definitely on our radar, but we're still sort of in the infancy stage on that as well.
Okay. I know from having just been in Edmonton a couple of weeks ago with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, I had a chance to speak to some staff from Edmonton's Sustainability Office, and they are starting to embed climate risk within their budget, which they already do a carbon budget, but they said they're starting to embed climate risk in to help evaluate again, the risk and the costs with decision versus the cost to various, materials used and et cetera. So might be a place to look into as well. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks for the work you're doing on this.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting question on the climate change and the climate resiliency, because I know that FCM has the modeling associated with risk, in particular with, I'm going to say horizontal infrastructure, storm sewers in particular. I would think that we would lean into that in terms of understanding the cost risk, but I'm not sure whether it can be used that way. I'll leave it with you. Yeah. Thank you. Is there any other questions, council? Seeing none, we have a recommendation. Is there a mover of the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Wright, since it's her favorite staff report, and seconded by Councillor Hanmer. Is it also your second favorite staff report? All in favor? That's carried. And thank you again for the book. We are now on to item 6B, the 2027 budget update. And there's some introductory remarks that we'll be receiving from Mr. Witzel.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. No formal presentation, just some introductory comments, as some of my time was occupied on the matter that we're going to talk about after this item. Good afternoon, Chair Freeman, Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public in attendance or watching online. I'm here today to provide a high-level overview of the 2027 budget update report. The staff-tabled budget will be released in December. Public engagement on the budget will occur throughout December, January, and February, with Mayor and Council consideration of the budget and public feedback, with final budget approval in February 2027. The 2027 budget will be a one-year budget, with the following budget cycle then returning to a multi-year budget covering the periods of 2028 to 2030. So this report is primarily an update report that is seeking endorsement of the budget timelines, as it will be the next council that ultimately considers and approves the 2027 budget. There are, however, a few policy recommendations for approval today that will inform the 2027 staff-tabled budget. In particular, I'd like to highlight that staff are seeking approval of revisions to policy FC012, the capital budget policy, which will align the capital inflation rate used in the budget with more recent lower levels of capital inflation. This adjustment will also reduce the required increase to the city's main capital reserves, which are funded through property tax base, which would result in an estimated savings of $554,000 or an approximately 0.5% property tax avoidance for 2027. The report also provides an update on the work completed to date by the Budget Committee and all staff across the corporation. Developing a city budget is a significant undertaking, and I would like to thank everyone involved for their collaboration and commitment to date, while acknowledging the work that still lies ahead. Lastly, the report highlights the new capital project submission system, or CPSS. This is an in-house developed system that was led by the asset management and financial planning team. I would like to thank Cassandra and Michael and the entire team for all their work implementing this new system. It's already produced very positive early results, and we look forward to the benefits that it will bring as part of this budget and the future budget cycles that will come after. At this time, staff are happy to take any questions that council may have on the 2027 budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the report and the work that went into it. I'm looking for questions. I think you answered all the questions in the report. I know that I really wanted this to come forward to just to also, as a footnote for council to have in mind when the strategic planning starts, so that we have kind of this bookmark or place setting, I guess, to remind us of the work that we have to do, what budget pressures there are, what we've already committed to. And so maybe we can keep that in mind when we do our strategic planning, because we know the strategic planning oftentimes informs the three-year budget. And so kind of keeping our own feet to the fire at that strategic planning level before we get to the point where we have to try to find more money, I think is going to be really important in the coming years. So that was one of the big reasons why I was hoping this report would come at this time. So thank you. Seeing no questions, is there a mover of the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Hanmer and seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? Thank you. That is carried unanimously. So that takes us on to item 6C. This is our revised agenda item, and we have introductory remarks again by Mr. Witzel. And I have to say that kudos to staff for the focused effort to create this briefing note and this recommendation and this whole report in time for today's council meeting and in alignment with some very, very difficult provincial deadlines. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Freeman. Yes, this was the other item that I was referring to that has occupied some time. So hello again. Next, I'll provide an update on Report Corp 2026-034 and the city's recommendation to submit an application under the Development Charge Reduction Program, which has been coined the DCRP. This grant program was announced on June 1st, and under very tight timelines, the staff team has reviewed the program and is recommending an application for 2 housing enabling growth projects that are included in our most recent development charge background study and bylaw, which was approved by Council on March 23rd, 2026, which is a requirement of the grant program. The city's grant would be seeking up to $14.8 million in grant funding, or the equivalent of 90% of project cost for the following 2 projects: the Conservation Drive Sanitary Pumping Station and the Herbsville Ira Needles to Columbia Street Water Main Expansion. It is staff's view that both projects align well with the goals of the program and will help support the addition of upwards of 2,850 housing units in the years ahead. In exchange for the grant funding, the city would be required to reduce our current residential development charges for all residential categories by between 30% and 50% and hold those reduced rates for at least 3 years. In recognition of the responsible management of our residential development charges over many years and the fact that our current DC rates are among the lowest of all qualifying municipalities and lower than most regional and GTA comparators, staff are recommending that Council approve a 30% DC reduction and that this lower reduction for Waterloo is justified. This reduction, if approved today, would be in principle only, which is an important program element from a reduced revenue and financial risk perspective. The DC reduction would become effective only once a transfer payment agreement is signed between the province and the city, approving the DCR funding, but would require a retroactive adjustment to any permits issued on or after March 30th, 2026. Staff believe this is administratively feasible, however, would require some rework and some prioritization of work. The amount of grant funding being sought is based on the calculated impact of a 30% DC reduction over 3 years, with the city aiming to be 90% cost recovered. Municipalities have been communicating the need to ensure that any DC reductions intended to lower housing costs and increase the rate of building come with funding to keep municipalities whole. At 90%, this program comes close to achieving that goal. Municipalities are required to contribute 10% from non-development charge own source revenue. So for Waterloo, staff is recommending that the city's 10% share for these respective projects would be funded from the sanitary, sewer, and the water capital reserves, which in staff's opinion is a reasonable source given that these are creating sanitary and water infrastructure projects. Staff will highlight one slight adjustment to recommendation 10, which would allow the city to proceed with executing the grant if approved in full or substantially in part. This amendment is being brought forward to provide necessary flexibility to ensure that the agreement can be executed during the summer if required, as indications are, the TPA may need to be executed as early as mid-August. We appreciate this as an important decision, and staff will do our best to answer any questions that council may have regarding the program and our recommended application. And just thank you to the members of council that reached out since this became public on Thursday afternoon with some of your questions, and hopefully we were able to answer them to the best of our ability, but we're happy to take any questions today. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions, council? Okay, I guess everyone's questions were answered. Councillor Vasek.
Yeah, I have a question about the timeline. I know you said it's in principle only, but is this basically council's time to approve it? And then especially if it's work that needs to happen in the summer, it's in principle, but we're approving it now. And could we anticipate that it comes back to council for a, not in principle, but for a definite approval later, or is this it?
Through Chair Freeman to Councillor Vasek, it would be the intention of staff with approval of this report today that the reduction would be in principle only, subject to securing the grant funding. If the grant funding is awarded to the city in full or substantially, then we would be with this approval proceeding with the reduction, and we would not, in staff's opinion, need to return to council seeking further guidance on that. We would, of course, be keeping council up to speed on how this application proceeds and if we are or aren't successful. If the grant, I'll say offer from the province is not in the range of what we are seeking, that is where staff then would be likely looking to return to council to seek direction whether or not we would proceed. The guidelines are a little bit to be determined in some places, and so it's difficult for us to say what our grant funding may be. The program guidelines does say that the province may recommend or award a revised amount, in which case we may need to return and seek direction from council. But if we are approved for our amount, then it would be in staff's view that it's close to covering off what we would be foregoing, and then we would proceed to implement the reduction.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, through you, Chair Freeman. Thank you. That's helpful. And the other question I have is about the impact and the evidence about the sort of alleged or hoped for impact on increasing housing. So my big question is, in the report, it talks about the hypothesis that the HST rebate and also the DC reduction would get us closer to meeting our projected residential building that was from the DC background study. But I'm having a difficult time sort of understanding how that would happen, because the report also says that we have some of the lowest DC rates, and still we're not seeing the kind of housing, we're not meeting the projections in that study and our targets in general. And so if the idea is that lowering DCs will result in more housing, and that's not obviously happening in Waterloo, can you tell me then how we think lowering DCs more is going to help?
Through Chair Freeman to Councillor Vasek, as you may have seen through some of the communication that's been putting it out by the Association of Ontario Municipalities, or AMO, through their DCRP primer, there is some of that uncertainty whether or not lowering DCs will provide enough incentive to see these units advance. Through some of their work, it's referencing that it'll be enough incentive for some, but maybe not for all. So it's a difficult question for staff to answer, to say that if council approves this and we are successful and we lower DCs, that we will for sure see the amount of development uptake that we're anticipating. But based on the communication that we have had with the industry, obviously they're they're very keen to see this supported today and this to move forward. And there are a few developments, in particular, the development at 85 Bridgeport, where a reduction of this nature would really help that 550 unit development proceed, as one of the impeding factors is development charges and how the CMHC loans and financing works. What we are contemplating, the grant program provides some flexibility to municipalities in terms of how this is implemented. So one of the things we are contemplating is whether, instead of providing a blanket discount, if we provide the 30% reduction as a grant. So that would be provided when the permit moves forward. So we would have some certainty that it's actually going forward, which may be a mechanism that we would like to see applied. The only other thing I can offer is, sometimes history does help provide some indication. And when we had a DC core area exemption years back, we did see that it had the intended consequence, and it did spur some of that development activity. But it is very difficult for us to say that this will for sure lead to the outcomes that the program is aiming to, which is more housing faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think the uncertainty is what's most concerning to me, and interesting that maybe it spurred something on before, but it's not context that we have a good understanding of. And so we're kind of just being asked to approve this based on vibes, feels bad. And did I miss that in the report about the 30% reduction as a grant?
Through Chair Freeman, Councillor Vasic, I do not believe that would be noted in the grant or in the report. So at the time of preparing the report, we didn't have all of the program information. Late last week, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing through the Ontario Big City Mayors have been providing some clarification. And so that is some information that we got in the slide deck, and we now have the grant application. It's been downloaded from the province's grant submission, which is TPON. So given the timeline, staff has begun preparing the application in case council does approve it today. And so within that, it is a section that talks to how would we provide the reduction, and doing it through a grant is one of the options. And so I know it's something that legal teams across many municipalities are also reviewing. What's the best mechanism to provide the reduction? There are alternatives that you could look at. You could push projects out of your bylaw. So you could shift some project outside of the window with the goal of lowering DCs, and you would have to work with your consultant to see where's that right mix. But I don't think that was the preferred path that city staff had come up with. We just spent a lot of time going through and updating our bylaw. All the projects were heavily scrutinized, and I believe council would like to see those all go forward and remain. And so we're leaning towards a different avenue, which would be either lowering the rates or doing it through a granting process. But yeah, it's been a very tight timeline, and the information is coming out at different stages, which is making it a little bit trickier. But I would say the report before you is a pretty solid reflection of where the program has landed, and staff are confident that we can make this work, and subject to being approved, of course, for the funding.
May I ask a follow-up? Okay, or I guess this is maybe more of a comment, but I appreciate that at council, and this is an excellent report, very good, tight timeline. I mean, you can only do as much as you have been given from the province and the federal government to give us what you can, and so this is very thorough and helpful. And I also appreciate that, like, when things come to council, we're not going to have our hands in every single operational detail, nor should we, of course. But that a grant seems like a pretty big program component that I would anticipate a staff report would come and say, here are the different, major program components or ways we might be able to administer it. And so to me, it seems like you're just getting new information on Friday about how to do it now, and we're going to approve potentially a report that we're really not going to be clear on council about how to administer it. You know, we've not approved other things on council for not having like much less operational detail, and have dug for more and more and more that we probably shouldn't even have been digging for. But now we're just gonna be like, okay, just make the program however you want. And not to say we wouldn't trust you to do that, I would, but it's a pretty big ask to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, please do this, and then for me not to have any real idea about how the program's gonna roll out, except through briefing notes and whatever. But like, we're decision makers for the city. It's a big responsibility, it feels like to me, and I would like to have enough information to be able to make a decision where I think, oh yeah, that seems like a really solid way to administer the program. I feel like I had enough information to make that decision, and I just don't feel like I have enough information, not to even mention my actual concerns about reducing DCs and sort of not knowing when I'm so bad at sayings, but when it stops, you know, like we can do a million things. And I just don't inherently believe that this is going to spur on housing. And I mean, we could try, and maybe it will, but I don't think it will. And when it doesn't, we're gonna be asked to do more and more and more. We do a ton. We're great partners with the development community, as much as the discourse around there says we're not, and I have a number of things that I've done a little bit of research on to show that we are. And so those are some of my concerns, but now I have other major concerns that we don't actually have enough information to make this decision. So anyways, I can play nice with the province, I guess, and the development community, which would imply that we're not playing nice, and I haven't played nice before, which I think isn't true. So if we have to do this because we need the money and we're gonna look bad to the province and to the development community, I can see that that's one reason to approve this. But also it doesn't feel good as a decision maker to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Bodley.
Just through Chair Freeman, just maybe a couple pieces there. I think for context, we do have certainty in terms of how long the reduction would be in place. So we would be agreeing to a 3-year reduction. So that is clearly outlined in the guidelines. There is very robust reporting requirements outlined in the guideline and the application. So I'm sharing that with some acknowledgement that Michael Puglisi and the team will have a fair bit of administration to do to track this. We would be reporting to council whether or not it's a requirement in the TPA on an annual basis. So we do have an annual development charge update report to council, where you could fully expect that this would have a new section within that report. So this is the reduction loss through 30% DC reduction if approved. This is the grant funding we secured. So we will be tracking that, and we will be able to articulate at the end of the 3-year program whether or not we were 90% funded or slightly lower. So that is, in my view, will be taken care of and administratively reported to council, so you have that line of sight on an annual basis. And maybe I'll just leave it with those items.
I have a small list, just letting people know. I have Councillor Bodley, Wright, Hanmer, and then the mayor. So Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Freeman, I'm going to signal pretty early on here that I don't think I'm going to be able to support this application or this proposal here, and that's not a reflection on any of the work that staff have done here. The timelines are ridiculously tight, and I guess the province and the federal government can move real quick when they want to give billions of dollars to developers. The question that I have that is unclear to me, that I'm hoping that you can provide a little bit more clarity on for me, is the timing of how the money comes in and goes out. I was just having a hard time sort of following. We're giving a reduction to developers of 30%, and so we are just not getting that money that we otherwise would have got when we're receiving it. When does the province and the federal government give us the money for that lost revenue, I guess. Not that we're being made fully whole, but that 90% of being made whole. Do we have an idea? Has it been made clear in this very short time frame how and when exactly we're getting this money if we do?
Through Chair Freeman to Councillor Bodley, it is in the guidelines kind of outlined that the municipality would receive grant funding over numerous years based on project milestones. And so from that perspective, if you look at the grant program is tying it to development charge eligible projects. And so from a city outflow perspective, we're, expending those outflows for the purposes of our projects, in a couple years' time. So we know that they would start in 2030 and 31. So we would, in all likelihood, see the grant funding coming in based on eligible expenses over that timeline. So in terms of the inflow, it wouldn't be inflowing grant funds in 2026 or 2027 necessarily, but you would start to see some of that revenue foregone as early as this year if supported. But from an overall cash flow perspective, we need to look at the reserve model and our ability to kind of cash flow and finance this. But with our grant projects being a couple years out, we don't have any immediate concerns from what that would look like. But they are treating it a little bit more like a traditional grant where the grant revenue will flow with eligible expenditures within the project is how I'm interpreting it. And then some various milestones on those projects. So funding at, contract award and funding at certain milestones within the project is how it's kind of being rolled out at this point in time.
Okay, great, thank you. And then a second question, my last question, if I may. And I apologize, I did not ask this in advance, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot on this one. But one of the projects that's listed here is for the Herbsville Road water main expansion. And it is my, or it would be my assumption that that project is only moving forward if the region is indeed widening Herbsville Road as they show in their capital. What happens if they don't? We're not going to be able to do this project if the region, for some reason, has to delay that project.
Through Chair Freeman and Councillor Bodley, yeah, it's a good question, and there is, I guess, an element of risk. We tried to identify a couple of larger projects. There's maybe a couple alternate projects. Obviously. If we scroll up a little bit, the pumping station project obviously was our immediate top candidate. It's going to support 2,000 units. It's entirely at city's discretion when it proceeds. So that we did kind of go back and forth on the alternative. So there is an element of risk on that one. And so I mean, if council was interested in moving this forward and wanted to kind of direct staff to swap that project out for an alternative, we would be, open to maybe making that work. We'd have to do that relatively quickly. But the goal there was we did a calculation on what are we foregoing in DC revenue at this level of reduction to generate an approximate amount of cost then that we tried to recover. We're permitted up to 5 projects. I don't think we want to apply for 5. The administration on that would be fairly significant. But we could, look to find 1 or 2 other projects that are in that range if there is some concern about the ability to fully control that project and its timing.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess, number one, I just want to register my disappointment that this is how the upper tier governments are intending to fund infrastructure, because it really does just introduce a lot more complexity and uncertainty into the mix, and what we're really looking for is more certainty and a better funding model for infrastructure so that we can make plans and stick to them. My question really has to do with a reduction in DCs that would be across the board, but we're only allowed to apply for certain projects for the grant funding. And So I'm trying to understand how that works and how you reverse a program like this once, I mean, they're saying it's a 3-year period, but how do you reverse a program like this after it's been in place for 3 years?
Through Chair Freeman, Councillor Wright, very good questions. I guess I'll take the kind of project eligibility one first. So the guidelines are fairly flexible. They're obviously the term housing enabling infrastructure, so whether that be a sanitary pumping station, water mains, sewer mains, roads, they're certainly eligible projects. It also includes community infrastructure, fire infrastructure, that kind of support housing. Those would also be eligible. But the guideline does indicate that housing enabling projects may be prioritized for funding. So staff had to kind of make a bit of a calculated assessment as to which projects may be the most likely to be successful. And so that's where we landed on the housing enabling, but we may see other municipalities who are putting forward community type of projects. And so just so council's aware, we did consider that. The 3-year timeline and what do we do in 3 years' time when there's the potential perception that the city is increasing DCs by 30%. In reality, what we're doing is ending a program. Communication will be critical. And so I think, leading up to that expiry date, we'll need to be doing some advanced communication. And that's where the grant model may be another nice way that maybe there's the ability to weave some language into that. And it would be a little bit more transparent, so you would see the full development charge less the grant, and we could put some communication around that it's like a timelined grant. And then I think just through some of the commentation earlier today, CEO Anderson noted, when the core area exemption was expiring, we did see kind of a bit of an increase in volume at the end. And so it was well understood that the offer was about to expire. So those are some of the things that we would be considering. And but we would need to make it very clear that 3 years from today, we're not all being asked why we're increasing development charges by 30%. We're actually returning them to the levels that they would have been without this grant funding.
Which brings me to my next point, which is really that we have done this before, as you were saying, as a form of stimulus or incentive to development in the core. And so can you just speak briefly to how effective that was as a model? You touched on it there, but just maybe expand a little bit, because that's what I'm really trying to understand, is there are a lot of different measures that have been thrown out there in the last few years, and it's hard to see any of them sticking to the wall.
Through you, Chair Freeman, and if any of my colleagues to the left would like to add on there, they're welcome to. I would say it was successful based on the information that I seen in terms of the cost to the city. Where this program, in my opinion, is a better program than that one, is that we needed to, as a municipality, fund that discretionary exemption in its entirety. So we funded that through the tax rate stabilization reserve. This program, as we're applying, would cover 90% of that foregone reduced DC collection. And what we're being asked to do is provide 10%. So if we're successful in the application comparison to the previous program where we had to fund it in its entirety, this would be, a better ROI for the city. And so as you'll see, we are recommending that our 10% come from the sanitary sewer and water reserve, which I alluded to in my opening remarks, is those are the assets that we're focusing. But it's also a little bit easier for them maybe to kind of absorb that cost or unanticipated cost in the near term versus asking council to fund it through tax rate stabilization. So those are just a couple of comments, but I don't know if anyone over there wants to add to that or if that's, covered it. Michael's got something?
Mr. Puglisi walked up to hold your hand. I don't know if he wants to add more to this.
I just wanted to provide a bit of context for council, so through your Chair Freeman. In terms of the exemption, like the core area, any exemption is really susceptible to the amount of uptake, and much like this program too, if we reduce DCs, it's a unique program where we're getting funding based on a project, but the DC reductions are based on actual activity. So if there's no activity because of this reduction, then we're not really out any development charges. But we could still potentially get funding for a project. On the flip side, if the attainment is 200% of what we anticipated, we could be foregoing a lot more DC collections than we're actually getting back in funding. So that's the uniqueness of this program, and the government was, in their program details, was very specific on using realistic expectations for what you feel your attainment would be over, we took a 5-year history of what our attainment could be. It's up and down. Some years it's very low, some years it's very high. Development's very sporadic depending on market conditions. So I just wanted to add the context that this program it's kind of like two sides of a coin. The reduction is based on how many people are actually applying for permits and how much we have to reduce the DC by. And then the funding component is based on the application that we're putting forward for these projects at a fixed amount of funding. And what we might get from the province. We might not get what we're asking for. I just wanted to provide that clarity based on what Brad was saying as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I did want to draw to council's attention that there's a slightly modified recommendation on the screen here as this conversation goes through, because there is some, we are kind of revolving around if we get the grant money or if we don't get the grant money, what happens. And so what you see highlighted there is kind of additional language around if we don't substantially receive what we're asking for. We don't have to choose to do this. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, Councillor Wright, sorry, I wasn't trying to jump in on your questions.
No, that was really helpful to point that out, and because what I'm looking for is, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and what I'm looking at is where we're mitigating risk, really. Yeah. And then the third question I have is really about, this council has been very focused on affordable housing, and this DC rate reduction is focused on market-based housing. And so I just want to know a little bit more about, in comparison, how is the granting, the infrastructure-related granting for affordable housing that's been coming from the upper tier governments, does it eclipse what we're talking about here in orders of magnitude? Because obviously we think affordable housing is very important, and we would not want to be prioritizing the market-based or harming our affordable housing outcomes through a measure that is specifically subsidizing market-based housing.
Through Chair Freeman, to Councillor Wright, I will attempt to answer that one, and maybe be a few parts to that. The first thing I'll note is through legislation, through the provincial government, affordable housing is exempted as a statutory exemption from paying development charges. So that's, I think, an important piece of context to note. So currently, any development that comes forward that has affordable units or is entirely affordable that meets the definition is not paying development charges. So this program would be focusing or targeting market-based development, as only those that are paying development charges would be benefiting from the 30% reduction. I would, kind of note that, just any housing that can be added, kind of to the housing stock along the various spectrum is probably good for where we are in kind of the current climate. And so if the cost of housing is being reduced, I think there's benefits across the board. I'm sure Michelle and others maybe could kind of layer into that. The other thing on affordable housing, they're also not required to pay property taxes. They would be exempted from property taxes. And so we have a rather large affordable attainable development that's underway at 2025 that is taking advantage of those programs. But where market-based housing kind of really helps us as a city is through that property tax generation and assessment growth. And so we see that, coming back to us in terms of property taxes and how that helps our budget. And as you may have noted in the 2027 budget update, we do continue to face some assessment growth shortfalls. So the one view of this is anything we can do to help kind of spur along even market development. It'll help us in some of those other areas. So that's kind of my best answer on that question.
So just to clarify, the infrastructure investments that the upper tier governments have been making that support affordable housing, because what I'm hearing here is the city is doing a lot to help support affordable housing by removing DC, well, I mean, the province removed DCs, but rolling back property tax, et cetera. These measures have largely been city measures, policy measures. And so I'm wondering where the federal and provincial governments have stepped up to offer the infrastructure funds to support the affordable housing.
Thank you. Yeah, so I won't have that information to be able to put it in terms of dollars. So this is a $8.8 billion investment through the province and the federal government combined. And as kind of noted, targeting market-based housing. So what is the equivalent investment in affordable housing? I won't have that number. All I can say is through the federal government, we were very successful through the Housing Accelerator Fund, securing upwards of over $20 million, which that program was more targeted towards affordable and attainable housing. But I don't have the number, and I don't know if Michelle does, but she's joined me, which I greatly appreciate.
Through Chair Freeman, I don't have a full accounting of all the funding that the federal and provincial government have put towards affordable housing specifically, but I would just remind Council of the $22 million that we received through the Housing Accelerator Fund, which about a third is going to be going towards 2025 University Avenue East to support actually very specifically the infrastructure to support that development. So it's a fairly sizable chunk of funding that we haven't seen coming from higher levels of government for some time.
Next up is Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I'll be very short because my questions, in essence, have been asked by the other two. My big concerns and worries with this were just around the cash flowing in and when we were going to be receiving the funding, because it's quite something to have a reduction in being able to pass that on, but yet we still have to finance these pieces. So I appreciate that response. And my second area was what's our exit strategy and what's compelling us to do this at this point. And I appreciate we've got the exit strategy right now. Are there that it's full or substantial and we can decide whether we want to keep going? But is there anything that would be negative for us not to even put an application in? And I'm thinking probably more the small p and the big P politics of sometimes you just do things because you need to be seen to be doing it, whether you are 100% behind it. And so I think of further down the road ramifications if we don't put our hands tied a little bit, I guess is really what I'm asking.
Through Chair Freeman, Councillor, very difficult question. I think it's certainly a factor to consider. As an organization, as a municipality, we've been very successful in grant applications over the past recent years. We had received a recent inquiry from a resident about, what are we doing to try to keep property taxes as low as possible, and part of our answer there was, actively pursuing grant funding through federal and provincial governments. And so the numbers in the top of my head and over the last 5 years in the magnitude of $45 million. So that is a factor that I think we should consider. I will share a lot of municipalities that Michael and I have talked through our finance counterparts as they're looking at this is, in their view, and I think ours to some degree, is a negotiation. So we're going to put forward a proposal and we're going to see what the province comes back with, but there are still some exit ramps if needed. So if the terms of the transfer payment agreement are consequential, that we think that could be something that we are not sure we can enter into without council, we can return. If we're not receiving full or substantially full grant funding, that would be another exit off-ramp, if you will. So that's kind of our thought, is that, there is probably, in staff's opinion, some good rationale to apply and see if we're successful in this range, but we also appreciate that there's pros and cons to this program. So it is by no means perfect. But I do think that there is a recognition here through the federal government and the province that they're hearing a little bit what we've been saying about we need to be compensated. So while not compensated entirely, it is a shift, I think, in a positive direction. And if we're able to get upwards of 90%, that's pretty close.
And I think I'd add to that 90% of projects that we know we need to be moving forward. So this is a funding opportunity for it. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but just from a risk standpoint, I had to ask it. Thank you.
And Mayor McCabe?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Freeman, and thanks to my council colleagues, because you've asked nearly all my questions, and thanks to Brad and the team for putting this report together so quickly. I can tell you, because I hosted the Ontario Big City Mayors in Waterloo on Thursday night, but then Friday, and this and one other item were the only topic of conversation with with ministry staff, and it was a good opportunity to have some very frank dialogue, including, you know, pointing out some of the areas of improvement where this program, you know, could have been developed much more collaboratively with the municipalities and in a way that kind of worked a little bit more collaboratively, I think is the way to say it. But they were there to answer questions we had, and they certainly followed up on areas where they didn't have answers over the weekend. So we certainly appreciate their being there and providing that additional information. I just want to note that you know, there certainly is a housing challenges, and you know, some people have called it a crisis. But I did want to note that in 2024, the City of Waterloo did hit, I believe we hit 127% of our housing target that was set by the province, and we got that big Building Faster Fund check. So we have been doing well, and then for 2025, I know we're very close to the 80% target, and we're having some dialogue, just double, triple checking, I don't know, checking the numbers on that. So again, we're very, very close for 2025. And so, you know, there certainly is that narrative out there that, and it's true in a lot of communities about the housing crisis. And certainly there's not enough affordable housing, 100% in Waterloo and Waterloo region. But, you know we've hit our targets. We've nearly hit our target for 2025, and as I said, we're negotiating, but we more than hit our target for 2024. And certainly in Kitchener, which is our neighbor, they've hit that target as well. So, you know, kind of overall, like housing is being built in this community and in Kitchener. So just wanted to put that on the table. And also to Councillor Wright's questions, you know, we have contributed through our statutory development charges reductions that the province tabled $8.7 million already to build affordable housing. So certainly plus there's the Build Now project that we've taken a big stake in. So we very much are doing a part, as we know municipalities across the province are. My question though is can you just explain how this works for us from a two-tier municipal structure? Because some of the municipalities a lot of municipalities are single-tier, we're two-tier. How does this affect the City of Waterloo with respect to, we know the region is going to put some projects forward as well, and those will be big-ticket items. So how does that impact us and any further potential reduction we may or may not have to make? Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Chair Freeman, to the Mayor's question. So the DCRP guidelines make it very clear that in a two-tier system, one or both or neither may opt into the program. So if we are aiming to apply, the region would not be obligated to, and the alternative would also be correct. Obviously, in a single tier, you're applying, you're committing to that reduction. So what we can note, and I believe this was outlined in the report, locally we've been in close contact with our counterparts across the region, and they're entertaining, you know, similar reports as what we are today. So the City of Kitchener is considering an application today. And the region of Waterloo, I believe, is considering their report on Wednesday, June 17th, and I believe the city of Cambridge is also today. So obviously with a Friday, June 19th deadline, it's pretty tight timelines here for all the respective councils. But yes, the region is a big factor in this, in that, you know, they're about 2/3 of the residential development charges, you know, plus or minus, depending where the lower tier portion is. And so if the region is to apply and is successful, then we would also see development charges lowered on the upper tier portion under similar parameters as what we're talking about. So for a 3-year period, and, you know, subject to them being secured for funding. So I don't know if that report is in your hands yet, Mayor. We had reviewed the packet and I hadn't seen it released yet, so it may be forthcoming.
Thank you very much for answering all of these various questions. And again, thanks for the work that staff have done on this report in a very short timeline.
And Councillor Roach had some questions.
Thank you, through you, Chair Freeman, and thank you, Brad and Michael, for all your work, your group's work on this. And just a couple, like, I really, you know, I looked at, you know, your excellent work here on your math, and just I have a question. Am I right in assuming or saying that the 14.8 that we stand to gain from the grant exceeds our 13.9 loss in developer reductions, correct?
Through Chair Freeman, that is correct. So we've applied for a little bit above what our calculation is, and so you know, the province may do a little bit of negotiation there, but it's a byproduct of the 2 larger projects we picked to kind of be in that, you know, very, very close to the ballpark. And as Michael touched on, there is a little bit of variability in that based on attainment. So this is based on 100% attainment within our most recent DC background updates. And so, you know, we could see our foregone revenue increase if we're a little bit above target, and, you know, it may decline a little bit if we're a little bit below. But yeah, as presented, we would be seeking a little bit more than what we're calculating in reduced revenue.
Excellent, thanks. And I'm leaning towards supporting this recommendation. And just to confirm for the record, because the team successfully leveraged our historically low rates to keep us at that minimum 30% reduction threshold and tied it to explicitly to grant approval. This is essentially a risk-free way to get a 90% discount on like $16 million worth of infrastructure costs that can unlock almost 3,000 new homes.
Through Chair Freeman to Councillor Roach, I would say it's entirely risk-free. We've tried to minimize the risk as best we can. At this stage, I would say it's a fairly risk-adverse application. That has come through in AMO's communication as well, is that, you know, at this stage, the reduction is in principle, subject to getting the funding. And I think that was a very early piece of the program that we did seek clarity on. And so that alleviated some of the risk. The ROI at 90% is pretty good, is fairly good. It's certainly better than previous programs. And so the mayor did touch on, you know, previous statutory exemptions where we are getting 0% recovery on those, and those are already in place and impacting us. So I think staff are leaning with where you are on that. This program is representing a pretty fair return.
Thank you, Brad, and your staff.
Councillor Basak. Okay. Is there any other questions? Okay. Shall we put a motion on the table and then we can receive comments on that, if that makes sense? So we have a recommendation. It's been slightly changed, as you see in item 10, with some intention of giving, you know, another decision point, shall we say, down the road for the mayor and clerk, if we, you know, in full or substantial part. So did you want to move what is here?
I wanted to just listening to my colleagues' comments around, it sounds like I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but maybe a little bit of hesitation around the substantially in part. Like, so I'm just wondering if people, if would be more amenable to, if we gave that like a, if it's within a 15% of the application, or if we wanted to put a target around that.
Councillor Hamner.
Thank you. Through you, just to respond, I'd be more comfortable leaving it just as it is right now. I worry that substantial could be a portion of one project and nothing of the other, and then I think it's a totally different decision. I think we need a little bit of, I think staff need a little bit of flexibility. And also we heard from some of the responses to the questions that there will be trigger points that bring it back to full council, and I would expect that if it is substantially in part, we'd hear about that too, before going too much further. So I'm okay with leaving it as it is.
Okay.
Did you want to move it as it is?
Oh, I can, sorry, then.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Sure, or I'll second it. Doesn't
Okay,
matter.
did you want to?
No, go ahead, Councillor
Okay,
Hamner.
moved by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Mayor McCabe. So it's on the table, and Councillor Bodley, you wanted to make some comments.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair Freeman. Again, I want to echo everyone on council here's commentary about how much work this has been on staff. So as I noted earlier, I'm not comfortable with this program. A lot of uncertainty and still in my mind some pretty substantial risk, particularly given the timing and the rush. I note the exit ramps, but notwithstanding this being a negotiation, as Michael and Brad had noted, if it is approved as it is by the province and the federal government, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm also very concerned with the precedent. It's in theory, as Councillor Wright noted, a 3-year project, but assuredly at the end of this, the development industry is going to say it needs to stay. Very likely they're going to tell us it needs to be more, which is going to put more substantial financial pressures on the city. But nevertheless, we just went through our DC update. We know that development charges are intended to recover the capital costs for cities that are associated with growth and new development. But moreover, it is indeed the province that determines how DCs are collected via the Development Charge Act. And since 2016, the province has introduced 12 pieces of legislation around development charges. Many of these pieces of legislation are substantial. A variety of exemptions and discounts, freezing rates, ability for developers to pay in installments, removal of eligible services, eliminating them for affordable housing, and to my understanding, they're possibly looking at eliminating them for attainable housing in the future. And the financial impact to the city on these changes is high. So frankly, the continued, in my opinion, overemphasis on this DC discussion suggests that our friends in the developer community's lobbying efforts seem to be working. DCs have traditionally been in the 6 to 8% range of the price of a new home, and they continue to be relatively in that range. So I am highly skeptical that this will have a very large impact on affordability. I believe that in particular, when you look at supply-constrained markets like ours, where demand is high like ours, lower DCs can help in the margins, but they certainly do not override the market with respect to price. And all we need to do is look at our peer comparator cities to the south of us in Cambridge. Cambridge has DCs that are currently 20% higher than the city of Waterloo, and Cambridge is in the same census metropolitan area as Waterloo. So you would think it's a pretty good comparison, right? Cambridge has higher DCs, substantially so. You would think that they're building less housing. You would think the housing is more expensive if we listen to our friends in the developer community. But in reality, the opposite is true. Cambridge has higher DCs than Waterloo, but in spite of our great efforts and the work that Mayor McCabe alluded to, they've actually been building a little bit more housing than us as of late. And housing prices in Cambridge are actually a little bit cheaper than they are in Waterloo. So it seems to me that at least in this CMA, Waterloo being in a premium market, our location, the demand for housing in Waterloo is outweighing the difference in DC costs substantially. Earlier today, we received our asset management review. We have an infrastructure deficit in the sanitary asset class of $5.2 million. So should the city approve this developer subsidy, we would be removing just over $1.6 million from reserves broadly. And those reserves are what help fund these infrastructure needs, putting further pressure on those asset classes. I won't reiterate all of the incredible work that staff and council have done on affordability, all of the projects through the Housing Accelerator Fund. We've dedicated a lot of time, money, and staff resources to a variety of projects here. But this program This is not a program for cities. It is a subsidy for developers. And so if the federal or provincial governments want to give money directly to developers as an incentive to build, or if they want to make us fully 100% whole for development charge reductions, fill your boots. I'm all for it. But asking cities with substantial budget pressures already and substantial infrastructure needs to further subsidize developers any amount with limited certainty about it having any effect in this CMA seems highly inappropriate to me. So for those reasons, I'm not going to be supported. Thank you.
Other comments? I appreciate those comments, I'd like to say, because I would like to be honest and say that I'm desperately struggling with the optics of this, and I agree that if the federal and provincial government want to play a role in this, and they can fund developers directly as opposed to taking like from us. Like it feels like it's definitely in that notion of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And we find ourselves, and I think what else I struggle with, and I'm just going to be forthright and say I'm going to support this motion because I feel like we need to demonstrate to the province that development really matters to us, and if they think that this program is the way to demonstrate how development matters to us, then fine, I'll support this. But what I'm really struggling with is the fact that we just went through our development review, as you said, development charge review, and we worked really hard to try to figure out how to sort out where we were going to allocate the limited development charges that we were now able to put into the bylaw because of so much being removed. And you know, the things that make a community whole go beyond sanitary sewers, and a lot of those things got pulled from our ability to fund them through DCs. And so I think all of that makes this really just so incredibly difficult. And we've been asking for a new framework, a new fiscal framework by which to fund municipal business. And instead of giving us a new fiscal framework, they've put us in the hopper for more grants. And we're always in this situation where we're competing with our colleague municipalities for resources, which they're not a guarantee. And I really, really, really struggle with that. I know that not only the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus, but more broadly, the Canadian big mayors have been trying to raise these issues to every level of government across Canada, and falling back to the tax base as being the tool by which to fund things, it seems as though it's not going anywhere in the near future. But you know, all of that, and so I struggle with this. The exit clause in 10 does help me a lot in terms of mitigating risk, because that demonstrates that, okay, fine, we'll come to the table. Part of me wishes that our DCs had started out being 100% higher than they were, because we're very competitive DCs in the province of Ontario, and you know, we took the heat just doing what we did. But I think that this is a way for us to at least try to demonstrate housing is, I feel like we're demonstrating in the province that housing is important to us when we've already demonstrated that it's important to us, but I just feel like it's just one more hurdle there's always a new hurdle, and this is today's, I guess. With that being said, sorry, I recognize there was a bit of rambling in there, but Councillor Vasek, I saw that you wanted to add.
Yeah, thanks for everybody's comments and questions. I mean, I entirely appreciate and value getting money that we might not otherwise not have, most definitely. And I also really get why we have to, I can't exactly remember how you said it, Councillor Hammer, but I agree with you, right? Like, what are you supposed to do when you are like, you're told, well, here's what we have, and you're like, okay, well, we'll play the game, like we have to, right? Like, what's our choice is what we feel like, right? That's how I feel too. And I said it in my one-on-one meeting with the mayor earlier today, which was like, we just keep, on one hand, we have to do that because that's the source we have. Those are the big wigs, and they tell us what to do, and we do it. And so you don't want to bite your nose off to spite your face, right? Basically, and at the same time, like this is bullying. I don't know how else to say it. Our own DC bylaw study said very clearly that there's no really evidence for if DC's work. And now, we're kind of trying to point to, again, really respect everything you're saying, and staff have to put something forward. You have to, because we have to do like what we're saying here, which is play the game, play nice. But now we're pointing to when we did this once in the Uptown and it worked, but we don't really know. But we're trying to say, okay, yeah, we're playing nice. We see maybe it worked there, but there's no evidence. And so we're going to approve something that there's no evidence of. Our rate impact to some of our water utilities are going to be worse off, which is potentially going to have trickle effects on our tax base, though that's not clear. But, those things happen, obviously, those kind of unanticipated and unexpected consequences. And so the real only benefits of this are, well, I mean, we will get some money, of course, and that's a huge benefit. But we have to say that because we're in this position because of years and decades of underfunding and downloading of services. And because we want to signal partnership to the development community, like I said earlier, and like all of you have confirmed that, but we think we are good partners, guys. Why do you keep saying we're not? Why do you hire PR firms to say we're not good partners? We are. We keep trying to fight for this. And so, I mean, I know it's really scary to like not play the game how we're supposed to play the game. And it could really fuck us over. But like, what if, sorry, I don't know, I'm not running again. Someone take me to the ombuds, I guess. But like, what if we were just like, we can't do it, guys, but we really want to figure out how to get more housing. If that's the goal, and we heard last week at council, either in camera or in public, that, try, and I can't remember who brought this presentation forward, but I really would like to remember. It was, don't argue with people based on ideology, but don't try and find common ground based on ideology, but try and find common ground based on action. And the action we're trying to find common ground on here is housing, more housing. And so, like, what if we were just like, no, we can't do this, but we really want to work with you on that shared goal and like see what happens. And I don't want to set us down the wrong course to be an example of the council who they had to make an example of. But I don't know, maybe we start doing business differently, which is what everyone keeps saying that we should be doing, because we just keep doing things by the status quo. So anyways, that's my compelling case. I'm going to vote against it, but I definitely understand why everyone may vote in favor of it. But if you want to try the plan B, I'm all for it. And totally have staff's back if we want to try it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Two contrary-minded, or sorry, against. I should say against in case you wanted to just not vote. So there's two contrary-minded, Councillor Bodley and Councillor Vasek. I just wanted to say thank you to staff again, but also to council for the thoughtful conversations that we've had on this, because I think it's important, and I think every opportunity we have to have dialogue around the fact that we actually really care about housing here, and we've demonstrated it on more than one occasion as a city, and it seems as though we just it's never enough. Mm-hmm. So with that, we're moving on to item 6D. And this is the 2025 Museum Review of Operations. And there is a presentation by Karen. And I just wanted to start out by recognizing that here at the city, we are really lucky. We have amazing staff here, and we have a lot of staff who are routinely recognized with awards, service awards, and for many of the things that we do around here that seem like regular business, but it goes beyond their regular job. And just recently, Karen Vanderbrink was the winner of the Dr. Jean Steckley Award from the Waterloo Heritage Foundation, which has recognized her career dedicated to preserving and sharing our local history. And I just wanted to say, because you're here, congratulations. And certainly we'll strive to recognize staff that win awards when they come visit us as well. So with that, I'd like to welcome you and let you advance your presentation.
Great, thank you, Councillor Freeman, and thank you. I'm very honored and privileged to have received that award, especially seeing as how it comes from your peers and colleagues that you've worked with. So I feel very honored to have that recognition, and thank you for acknowledging it. So with that, good afternoon, Chair Freeman and members of council. I'm here before you and also our listeners and watchers online and our and staff in the audience. I'm here to report on the 2025 annual operations. Like I always come to council and give you a review of the previous year's activities. I usually try to do this report in May, but we were a little busy this year doing an exhibit changeover because May is museum month, so that's why I usually try to target May with this report. So I am pleased to present the Cities of Waterloo Museum's 2025 review of operations. This annual report provides an overview of the museum's activities, accomplishments, partnerships, collections work, and strategic priorities over the past year. It also demonstrates how the museum continues to advance the goals of the museum and collection strategy while strengthening community connections through programming, exhibits, research, preservation of Waterloo's heritage. And, oh, perfect. 2025 was a productive and a successful year for the museum. We continued to expand our community reach through innovative programming, meaningful partnerships, and in fact, impactful exhibitions. Our work was recognized by the community through receiving a second Waterloo Region Records Reader's Choice Award in the entertainment category, and that's a pretty big category for such a small little site, so we're extremely pleased that we won again in this category. And I wanted to emphasize that the museum maintained a strong focus on accessibility, reconciliation, community engagement, collection stewardship, and historical research, while continuing to deliver a broad range of services with our teams, our small team. So strategic progress. The museum's collections strategy adopted in 2015 is pretty much near completion. Through council support, the museum continues to operate within the provincial standards for community museums in Ontario, ensuring we remain eligible for future provincial funding opportunities should they become available. We're waiting for provincial opportunities. The most significant remaining recommendation from the museum's strategic plan is the relocation of the museum to an uptown location to improve visibility, accessibility, and community engagement. Council's direction to engage in costing and design for the Carnegie Library site represents an important step towards advancing that objective, and I look forward to bringing an update on this work. We also continue to work towards securing an appropriate consolidated collection support facility, and we're beginning to consider the development of a new strategic framework to guide the museum's next chapter. One of the most notable trends in 2025 was the growing demand for adult and senior-focused programming. Museum staff delivered historical presentations and community talks for seniors, residents, libraries, and community groups and city programs. The popularity of our talks has spread beyond Waterloo, with requests coming in from libraries and seniors residents in the townships. More than 600 participants attended these presentations throughout the year. The log cabin continues to serve as an important heritage destination. Summer and winter programming welcomed over 1,100 visitors and supported a broader community engagement initiatives connected to Waterloo Park. And these programs demonstrate the increasing value that the residents place on local history and lifelong learning opportunities. Community collaboration, it continues with our team, and participating in community events like neighborhood gatherings, service center open house, and Lumen, to name a few, are some of the partnerships essential to the museum's success. During March break, we partnered with Conestoga Mall to present an Indigenous creation story puppet performance that attracted more than 300 attendees. Our Haunted Histories self-guided cemetery tour generated over 90,000 social media impressions, demonstrating strong public interest in creative heritage programming. We also collaborated with the Waterloo Public Library, Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery, Waterloo Historical Society, and the Uptown Waterloo BIA to create an interactive, amazing race-style event that encouraged participants to explore local history and cultural assets. Our Remembrance Day initiative was particularly meaningful in 2025 with the launch of the Veterans Banner Project. Working with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 530, the Uptown Waterloo BIA, and Corporate Communications, the museum developed commemorative banners recognizing Waterloo's residents who served and sacrificed during the First World War. 24 banners were installed along the Spurline Trail, while additional community-sponsored banners were displayed throughout the Uptown Waterloo. The project expanded our Remembrance Day programming and helped connect residents with the stories of local veterans and wartime contributions. Marketing and public engagement. The museum continued to strengthen its public profile throughout 2025. A new partnership with Mike Farwell on 570 News introduced a monthly Throwback Thursday segment featuring stories from Waterloo's history. Jennifer, who you've had come and speak before you is our main person with Mike Farwell working on this project. The program proved very successful and will continue in 2026. So you can listen on the first Thursday of every month. Our social media platforms gained more than 650 new followers, helping us reach new audiences and sharing local stories and in engaging ways. And at our Conestoga Mall exhibit space, more than 4,500 visitors attended exhibitions throughout the year. And in 2025, we presented 3 major exhibitions. The first 2 exhibitions, developed in partnership with the Legacy of Hope Foundation, explored the lasting impacts of residential schools in the 60s scoop through survivor stories and historical interpretation. These exhibitions supported reconciliation efforts and provided opportunities for learning, reflection, and dialogue within our community. In July, the museum opened its own in-house curated exhibition, The Art and Legacy of the Waterloo Seagram Distillery, which explored the 130-year history of one of Waterloo's most significant industries and highlighted the intersection of science, manufacturing, and community history. We also install exhibits at City Hall and are always trying to make connections to relevant topics. Last year, with the closing of the Hudson's Bay department stores, we mounted an exhibit on their distilled spirits production and on licensing bylaws from the past, which are always fun. We also, our collection and preservation and protecting Waterloo's heritage is also one of our core responsibilities. A major accomplishment in 2025 was the transfer of significant former Seagram Museum archival materials from the University of Waterloo's Special Collections and Archives. This acquisition reunites the archival records with our existing Seagram artifact collection and strengthens the opportunities for research and exhibit development. Staff also continued on a comprehensive collection inventory project. Since late 2024, more than 5,000 artifacts have been re-inventoried, verified, and updated within our collections database. And also we are very much looking at making our accessibility, inclusion, and research available to the public in many ways. So significant work was undertaken to caption audiovisual materials associated with the Legacy of Hope exhibitions and our Seagram exhibition to ensure compliance with AODA standards. The museum collaborated with Indigenous artists and community members, including Dakota Brandt and contributors to Beat the Track project, helping to broaden perspectives represented within our exhibitions. And we also worked with the Caribbean Canadian Association of Waterloo Region to celebrate 50 years of their organization's work advancing Black entrepreneurial businesses. And staff also responded to over 35 research requests throughout the year. The museum also participates in our corporate sensory backpack program and updates our accessibility and assistive features pages on our website to include the experiences for each exhibit. Work also continued throughout 2025 on the Sports Parade of History project, where we are now entering into the active development phase, which will create an important new digital resource celebrating Waterloo Region's sports history, which will live on the museum's website. And finally, in the last 15 seconds or so, in closing, I'd like to recognize the exceptional work of our museum staff, volunteers, community partners, and supporters. The museum continues to deliver a level of programming, exhibitions, collections care, and community engagement that exceeds what would typically be expected of an institution of our size. With increasing requests for programming, outreach, accessibility initiatives, and community partnerships, all pushing our current resources to their limits. As we look forward to the future, we continued investment in foundational staffing, collection stewardship, and strategic development will be essential to sustaining service levels and meeting the growing expectations of our community. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, Council? Councillor Wright.
Not really a question, just mostly a comment. It is so inspiring to see a presentation like this that is so clearly linking our community's past to its present and then tying that to our future, where we are going, and why does it, what do these things mean from this local perspective? And so just kudos to you and your team and the cast of volunteers who are bringing this forward and making these investments in these exhibits, because they're very powerful. Clearly the award shows that your curatorial work is outstanding, and just really want to thank everybody for those efforts and for your commitment to storytelling in our community.
Thank you. I'll take that back to the staff and volunteers.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I will add to say that I know the museum wants a new home, but I really wish it would stay at Conestoga Mall, or that there'd be some component that stayed there, because I do think that it is a place and a space where people can go in the winter, and where they are there for various and sundry other reasons. And I think they wander into the museum to see what is there, and I think it brings great value to the city that you are there. So I'll leave that with you. I know that you're looking for more space for things, but I would hate to see us give up that space as we seek other space, I guess. Council, there are recommendations here for us to consider. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Bassick, seconded by Councillor Roach. All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, consideration of notice of motion given at a previous meeting. There's none. There is a notice of motion here with regard to Bill 60. It's here for your review, Council, and consideration at our next meeting on the 22nd of June. Communications and correspondence, there's none. Unfinished business, there's none. Questions, Council? Councillor Hanmer?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I think many of us have been receiving comments about the informal meeting that's coming up next week. And a lot of and I don't want to preempt what we're going to be discussing next week, but one of the key things has been around communication and notice about the meeting even coming up. So my question is just, is there anything more that we are able to do to, at this stage, we still have a week before the informal, but just to get the word out about it and how people can participate?
Mr. Ormson?
Through you, Chair Freeman, thanks for your question, Councillor Hamner. And yes, our colleagues in communications, Carrie could maybe speak to some additional work that we're going to do to try to alleviate some of the missteps we had in the communication and trying to get a little bit more exposure to this. I think there's another option in terms of timing too. We're in council's hands. We could actually push out the informal a little bit if that were council's desire too. But I'll let Carrie speak to some of the additional measures that we might be able to do with respect to communication.
Thank you for the question. We've been chatting with planning staff about some additional things we can do. One of the concerns was that with so many potential properties involved, we haven't mounted our traditional large-scale planning signs, but we do have the option of doing some smaller signs that will provide online links to the Engage page where all of the project information and continuing details are provided. And we've been in discussion about some additional promotion that we can do as well. So we will try and get the word out a little more.
If I could follow on. I did see in some of our communication that we had used Canada Post to get messages out, and I'm hearing from residents, I have one of the properties in my ward, that they have not received letters at all. So I don't know if there's a follow-up that we do with Canada Post or what's happened there.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hamner, through the chair. This has been a problem for a long time with Canada Post. It's not a fully reliable method. That's why we try to use multiple platforms for engagement, including Engage Waterloo Region. But we understand council's concerns about this, and I think there's an opportunity to place some additional signage and to be a little bit more assertive with respect to the other communication options that we have.
Thank you.
Other questions, council? Seeing none, under new business, Councillor Wright.
I have 2 items today, thank you. One was yesterday was the Grand Porch Party in the Uptown West neighborhood. And despite the intense rain, most of the day, there were so many people out enjoying the music that was being hosted on front porches. And so just wanted to shout out to all of the community volunteers that make this long-standing neighborhood festival possible. They are an incredibly resilient crew. The neighborhood appreciates them so much, and the event draws people from all across Uptown. And so it's just really great to see that unfolding despite the weather. And then secondly, I just want to nod to Saturday, where for the first time ever, there will be an Indigenous market in the Waterloo Town Square to coincide with Indigenous History Month. It is community initiated. So kudos to Bill Martin for getting this off the ground. More than 20 Indigenous vendors, as well as live Indigenous music, will be featured at this event. So I'll be there to see anybody who drops by. Thanks.
That was on my list, was the Indigenous market, because I'm looking forward to that. Other new business, council? Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks for, unfortunately, I'm going to be out of the area with another conference on the, for the next few days, and won't be able to participate in that marketplace. But thank you to Bill for spearheading that. I just wanted to make a note that on Saturday evening, I attended the dinner for the KW I struggle saying the word, the Stamp Collecting Society, the Philatelic Society. They had an exhibit starting, I think, Thursday night or Friday all day, Saturday all day, and then part of the day on Sunday at the Memorial Rec Center in Uptown, and then a dinner and national awards. There were people here from across Canada, people here from, some people from the States, and they just, you know, they raved and raved publicly and to me directly over dinner about how wonderful our staff were, because I guess the exhibits are very, very particular to get them set up in the arena and flip the arena from an arena to an exhibit center, but just that staff were pleasant, we're professional, we're friendly, we're helpful, and they couldn't say enough good things about them. So just wanted to share that and say thank you to all of them who participated.
Awesome. Other new business, council? I just wanted to share that Saturday is a busy day for a lot of things. It's the end of school, things wrapping up and everything. So a lot of the Army cadets are having their ceremonial reviews throughout the region and beyond. And so one of the Waterloo Cadet Corps is having their ceremonial review at the memorial, at the Albert McCormick on Saturday. So I'll be there for part of the day. And the Eastbridge Neighborhood Association is hosting its annual food truck festival in Eastbridge Park. So lots of things going on, and I hope that the weather's good for everyone. So with that, council, I think we are, unless I'm mistaken, I think we're on to adjournment, right? Oh, bylaws, yes. Yes, enactment of bylaws, moved by Councillor Bodley, seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Vassick, seconded by Mayor McCabe. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.